Hey guys, I've moved into my new house and I don't have my studio set up yet, but Linus Tech Tips came out with the finale episode of the Linux Daily Driver Challenge, and I wanted to take a look at it with you because there's a lot of people out there who think that LTT is just trying to sabotage Linux gaming, which is paranoid delusions, and you need to stop with that paranoid bullcrap. That's not how this works, okay? He's not some like Microsoft fanboy. He does not like Windows. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a gander at the LTT Linux Daily Driver Challenge. Let's do this.
There are a plethora of reasons to transition your daily driver gaming rig over to Linux.
You could be sticking it to the man.
Or wanting to support the open source community.
Maybe you daily drive Linux for work already.
And all your games are natively supported anyway.
Or maybe you just want a new and challenging hobby.
But if what you want is a simple, painless gaming experience, then let this be a cautionary tale. One of trials, tribulations, and of course, sponsors.
I can already hear some of the comments that are going to say, oh, he's just like picking on Linux. It's unfair. And, you know, Linux gaming is painless, Morty. It's painless. You got nothing to worry about. You're going to have a good time, Morty. But if you actually think that Linux gaming is easy, painless, simple, then you're delusional, right? Like it is, there's a lot of tweaking. I mean, that's what PC gaming is. And so the idea of like adding that additional layer of Proton, it makes things a little more difficult. It really does. That's not to say that you can't game on Linux. You definitely can. I've made a career out of gaming on Linux, but it's not as simple as, using Windows to game. And using Windows to game is not that simple.
For most of our 1 month challenge, Luke and I avoided specifically seeking out titles that would either validate the Linux gaming experience or intentionally make it look bad. We just focused on playing the games that we would normally want to play.
Or at least we tried to, because not all the games that we wanted to play actually worked. The very first day I installed Linux, I also tried to play the Battlefield 2042 beta. The previous day, still on Windows, I'd owned some noobs with my buddy Joe, and we wanted to play again the next night. But that wasn't going to happen due to this challenge. It was reassuring, I guess, that even more advanced Linux users were also unable to play, but that didn't actually remedy the fact that I couldn't play games with my friends.
Yeah, that's a common thing. I mean, on Linux, you really can't expect to have a multiplayer experience, at least right now. I mean, that's not to say that you can't have a multiplayer experience, but expecting to have a multiplayer experience is going to be a letdown, I think. The thing is, I am a single player gamer. I don't like playing multiplayer games. I don't have a friend group that always plays a certain number of games, or at least a fixed number of games online together all the time. So for me, it's not a loss to be a Linux gamer, but I can understand where, if Luke is playing games or if Linus is playing games and they want to play with their friends, well, they're probably not going to have the greatest experience.
I assumed that this challenge would be more painful for me than it would be for Luke. I mean, after all, he has years of Linux experience while I came in with basically none. But here's the thing. I game mostly by myself as a way to relax or to hang out with my kids, and I am extremely flexible about what game I'll play. If something doesn't work, screw it, I'll just play something else. Luke, on the other hand, whose social circle is deeply immersed in gaming culture, has so much more on the line if he can't solve a problem.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Yeah, like I literally had a friend ask, "Hey dude, when are you going to be back?" Obviously, I had never actually left, but I was a lot more difficult to include as a lot of competitive games that have anti-cheat just don't work. Or it took me so long to get a lot of games to a satisfactory level that by the time I was ready, everyone else was just done gaming for the night. And as a lot of my friends like to just try random games out for fun, this actually happened a lot.
Yeah. For Luke, I can understand that. You're not going to be able to play random games at the spur of the moment. You can't just at the drop of a hat say, "Oh, I'm going to try this brand new game," or this game that's just had a recent update that might break compatibility with Proton or Linux. That's the unfortunate reality of the world we live in right now. I think that Valve will pretty soon overcome that limitation. They're going to have the Steam Deck out there, and the Steam Deck is going to be moved in the millions of units. And so developers will actually want to target the Steam Deck. That's going to solve this issue. I really think it will. And then people gaming on Linux desktop, not Steam Deck, will have access to these games as well. And I think that's kind of the ultimate goal. That's the Trojan horse that Valve is banking on, because they know that Windows is a threat to their bottom line. And unfortunately, they hitched our cart to the only horse in town, which was Windows when Steam launched. But nowadays, Windows is an existential threat to not just Steam's bottom line, but every PC gamer's passion. Windows is like the antithesis of what the PC used to represent, which was freedom of choice. You have the choice to pick whatever you want to do and use the software you want. And Microsoft has been slowly encroaching on the open garden of PC gaming, of PC in general, and have been trying to turn it into their own walled garden. And so Valve knows this, and they're trying to remedy that by creating the Steam Deck. And I think that Valve is working hard to ensure that a lot of the games on Steam are going to work just fine out of the box when the Steam Deck launches.
Our goal is not to spread FUD about the state of Linux gaming, though, so it's time to get specific about some of our less good experiences. First up is Steam, or rather, not Steam. Valve's goal of reaching 100% compatibility with the entire Steam game library is admirable. Actually, incredible.
Yeah, they kind of backpedaled on that a little bit. They said, oh yeah, we want to have the entire Steam library available. I don't think I don't know how possible that is, just looking at compatibility right now, and the nature of games being updated so frequently. We'll see where compatibility lands on the Steam Deck. I think it will be better than it is now. I've heard that Valve is working on Proton stuff that hasn't been released yet that will increase compatibility with games. But I don't know. I don't know where that's going to land, honestly.
As noted by this here Reddit post, the Steam game library is chock full of amazing gaming experiences from AAA studios and indie developers alike. But it's also not the silver bullet that it would have been 10 or even 5 years ago, when nearly every game worth playing was available on Steam.
Half of Twitch's top 20 games, at least at the time of filming this, are not on Steam. And I know, being a popular game to stream doesn't necessarily mean it's popular with random gamers out there, but these are all very big name games, and being on Steam isn't an automatic win either. Look at Apex Legends and New World, both massive games, both listed as borked on ProtonDB.
Isn't New World the Amazon game? Because if that's the case, I wouldn't touch that with a 40-foot pole. I wouldn't touch that with a 100-meter pole. But that's just me.
Want to try one of my personal favorites? Crosscode? Click install, click play, and as simple as that.
Crosscode is a fantastic game. If you haven't played it, I highly recommend it. It's really good. It's actually built in browser, if I'm correct. I think it's using Phaser as its engine, which is like really cool, and it's distributed using like a different version of Firefox. I could be wrong about all that, and I'll cut this out if I'm wrong. But Crosscode is a great game.
I mean, I was amazed at how painlessly my Xbox One controller worked. Though I should note that I stuck with a wired connection rather than trying to tackle getting the unofficial XOW driver working. Valheim, meanwhile, ran amazingly and immediately, demonstrating how even smaller developers can make it work if they've got the will.
In addition to that, while not necessarily native, I played Legion TD 2, Towerfall Ascension, Faster Than Light, Slay the Spire, Path of Exile, and Rust, and they all worked perfectly with zero actual effort. And interestingly enough, Dota 2 and CSGO both had completely game-breaking problems that weren't isolated to my system during the challenge.
Yeah, I have found that games that run through Proton work better than games that are native on Linux. Don't ask me why. If it's a native Linux game, it should be using the Steam runtime. But I've seen it. I've seen it, and it's that's just my experience. I don't know. Let me know down in the comments if you had a similar experience.
They seem to be solved now, but it goes to show that just like with Windows, because a piece of software was made for it, doesn't mean it's actually going to be perfect.
I didn't have any issues running CSGO. Even got me some kills, boys. But I did notice significantly more stutters than I'm used to seeing on this class of hardware. That could be an NVIDIA driver issue, or it could be something else entirely, but for me, it worked well enough that I didn't feel like digging any further into that rabbit hole.
It's probably an NVIDIA driver issue. But then again, I haven't gamed on Windows except for like VR in years. So I have an NVIDIA GTX Titan X in here, and I haven't noticed any issues, but I'm not, playing, 280 frames per second. I'm not used to that kind of buttery smooth experience, I guess. So maybe that's my issue. NVIDIA's drivers are absolutely garbage, and Linus has said as much in his WAN show. So the idea of, gaming buttery smooth on an NVIDIA graphics card on Linux, that's unreasonable. If you have an AMD graphics card, a Radeon or something like that, you're going to have a good time. As long as you're using something like Manjaro, where you have like a really recent updated kernel. That's why I'm really excited about the Steam Deck, because it's actually using like an Arch derivative, and it has a fantastic little APU in it that's going to smoke the competition.
With all of that said, in spite of all of that work, we're honestly just not there yet. And we're mere months from the launch of the Steam Deck, when 100% compatibility is supposedly coming, which, as of writing this, just got pushed back by 2 months to February.
That's the second time they've said that. And I don't think that that's what Valve... Is that what Valve has said? I want to look this up now, because I feel like that's not quite representative of what Valve has said. Yeah. So Valve said that they aim to be compatible with all the games on Steam. I don't think that that's a realistic goal right now. Like I said earlier, I think once the Steam Deck has sold a couple million units, then developers will get on board. But until then, I don't know if Valve has the resources to support all the games that are on Steam through Proton. But we'll see. Maybe they will. Maybe they have like a secret weapon in some unreleased update to Proton. Maybe they hired Glorious Eggroll.
Again, I thought maybe this is an issue with my proprietary NVIDIA driver. Maybe it's out of date. But Manjaro begs to differ. Apparently, I am up to date. So your mileage may vary. Another problem that's been...
NVIDIA's graphics drivers are notoriously laggy behind the Windows releases. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's a slightly older and less awesome version of Linux drivers than there are for Windows.
Natively supporting Linux is seen by some developers as a somewhat brutal experience. Ben Gaulis has a rather enlightening thread about this on Twitter. He goes on to explain that while Linux gamers were a very vocal part of their pre-launch community, they accounted for less than 0.1% of sales. Yet they generated more than 20% of auto-reported crashes and support tickets. He also stated that near the end of his time there, nearly 100% of tickets were still Linux-related, despite Linux receiving the majority of the engineering effort, meaning the company likely spent hundreds of thousands of dollars supporting a community that made them a few hundred in sales revenue.
And if that's the case, that is not smart business. It really isn't. I know that if my company released a game for Linux, Mac, and Windows, and that was the reality, I would seriously consider not supporting the Linux version. like if that was the case, because that does not make business sense. What I would probably do is release a Linux version, and say, all right, guys, you got this from here, because they probably do. So, that would just be, that's my personal, thought on that matter. I don't know if that's how Ben Gawlis or whoever thinks, would think to do that. A lot of game developers don't want to release their, software as open source. And that's a huge issue for Linux gaming, because if you release it as open source, then the Linux community will take care of it. And you can keep all of your assets, your 3D assets, your textures, and your whatever else that you have that's like the art of the game, and you can keep that proprietary and copyrighted, so you can sell that, but release the code as open source, and you'll be able to have the Linux community take care of their own port. They don't need your support at that point. So you release your game, and you support the Windows and the Mac version for the people who don't know how to build and maintain their version of the game, and release the source code, and the Linux community will take care of it. And if it's a good game and it's worthy of being taken care of, I should say. But I really think that is a viable model. Now, a lot of companies, especially game developers, will think, oh my God, that's sacrilege. I can't do that. But you're not really losing anything. If you release your game as open source, you don't lose anything. You gain a community that builds up around it. I mean, look at Doom, look at Quake, look at OpenRA and OpenRCT2 and Caesarea and all these games that have like taken these classic games and re-implemented them in open source. That is amazing. I mean, even stuff like Super Mario 64 and the GTA remakes that were made by the community that don't suck. There is a huge community of people who are willing to dedicate their time to these games that they love. And if you make a good game and you want it available for everyone to play for years to come, make it open source. Why not? You won't lose anything. You'll gain a community.
And this isn't the only version of this story. And every time problems like these happen, it's just more ammo for developers that would rather spend zero time working on Linux versions of their products. I believe that is why over 65% of reported anti-cheat enabled games have not confirmed Linux compatibility, despite many of the anti-cheat developers getting on board.
And as much as everyone already knows it, it bears repeating. The fragmentation problem continues to be desktop Linux's greatest obstacle to widespread adoption. Take It Takes Two, for example.
Fragmentation? Are you talking like fragmentation like all the different distros? I mean, I think that is a bit of an issue. I mean, I said it the other day on Twitter. There are so many different options, and many Linux community members can be so hyper-focused on maximizing their options that they forget about, what it means to be a normal person and to be afraid, to be paralyzed by choice anxiety. That's a real thing that people have. And so if you come at someone who's asking about, hey, Linux, what's a good option for me to switch to Linux? Because I'm really interested. And you say, well, there's OpenSUSE and there's Gentoo and there's Ubuntu and there's, and you go off on a list of 100 different distributions. They're not going to know what the difference is. That's why I made the video I did the other day about switching to Linux. You need a couple choices, 2 or 3, and you need someone with a little bit of expertise who can guide you to make a decision that you feel good about. But it's also about like making sure that what you choose now is not permanent and you can move on from that. So fragmentation is a bit of an issue. I would agree with Linus, but I don't think that it's necessarily that big of an issue, especially when it comes to Steam in particular. While there might be different like libraries, different builds of internal libraries and stuff on different Linux distros, Valve is supporting the Steam Linux runtime, and that really normalizes things across distributions. So it's not that huge of a deal, I don't think. But I could be wrong about that. I don't know.
Linux gamers, and more broadly, the Linux community, needs to understand that until the burden of supporting Linux is reduced significantly, this is always going to be a problem.
We actually live streamed trying to work through the Forged Alliance issues on Floatplane. Subscribe, by the way. There were more than a few comments in the chat criticizing us for choosing to play that particular game because it's old, it's just some crappy Java game, it's obscure, or because it's not fair to Linux.
Those first three reasons are reasons that it should work on Linux. It's obscure. It's Java. It's old. All of those are reasons that the game should work well. So I don't know what those comments are talking about. The idea of like, oh, you chose to do this game. I've been guilty of that in the past. You chose to play that game. That's on you. That's your fault. That's not Linux fault. That's not healthy for a community, guys. Like I've done that in the past. And it's really not healthy for a community. If we want to grow and thrive, then we have to be better than that. And I think that we are moving past that. I think that there is just a vocal minority of people who are just jerks about stuff like that.
But the bottom line is that none of that matters. What matters is that we like it, and we wanted to play it, but instead of doing that, we played Terminal Command Simulator. And honestly, I've gone through enough of that over the last month that it has sucked a lot of the enjoyment out of using my computer. I have a pretty busy life, and when I manage to salvage an hour to relax and play video games, that is what I want to do. And it's really opened my eyes to why so many people choose to play on console instead of on PC. This has got to be how a not super computer savvy user feels about updating a driver or fixing a firewall setting every time they just want to play a bloody game. Yeah.
Oh man, that's absolutely true. PC gaming is to console gaming what Linux gaming is to PC gaming. It's just levels, and not to say that one is better than the other, because they're not. It's just a matter of your experience level and what you're willing to tolerate in order to have a gaming experience. Some people just want to sit down, plug in a controller, or turn on their controller and play. That's a console gamer. Other people want to sit down and aren't bothered by the fact that some of their games don't work out of the box and they have to go and add a command line flag or something. That's PC gaming. Other people aren't bothered by the fact that their games don't work and they get a chance to dig into the terminal, move some files around, do whatever they need to do, and figure out how to configure wine properly and add a wine prefix or whatever. That's other people. I don't think any of them are better or worse than the others. It's all a matter of preference and taste and what you want to do.
To be clear, I would never say that just because some old game doesn't run, it means that Linux sucks. In fact, I've permanently switched my laptop over to Linux because there are a lot of things it just does really well, even for someone more on the noob side of things like me. Anything that relies on an external service that updates independently of your computer can just unexpectedly break, and that's a lot of games these days.
Yeah, like I said earlier, trying to have a multiplayer experience on Linux is just asking for trouble. And as I said before as well, I think Valve releasing the Steam Deck in the way that they are is trying to get developers on board for the Steam Deck as a bespoke console platform. They're saying that it's not a console, but if they want the Steam Deck to be successful as a platform, then it has to behave like a console, right? This kind of stuff is easy to do when you have a mouse and keyboard and you can futz around in the terminal, but you can't do that with a touchscreen. That's an inferior experience. And so I think Valve knows deep down that it has to behave more like a console than like a PC out of the box. And so if they can provide the kind of experience that console gamers would expect on the Steam Deck, they'll sell like gangbusters. And I think Valve knows that. That's why they're doing this as a first-party device instead of having it, fanning it out to OEMs to manufacture. So my hopes are high for the Steam Deck. I think that it's going to work for not just Linux gaming, but for Valve and the future of PC gaming. But who knows? We'll see.
So you always need to make sure that you read, especially the recent comments, rather than just relying on the rating on ProtonDB. After an extremely short setup, my daughter was happily hanging out in a Discord voice channel with her siblings playing Minecraft Java Edition and had no idea she was on a completely different platform. My son and Luke and I had a blast pinning each other to walls in Towerfall using Remote Play Together, which worked great on Linux. Overall,
Towerfall is one of my favorite games of all time. I don't know if we know this here on the channel, but Towerfall is superb.
I'm really happy I did the challenge. I learned a lot, and it gave me a lot of hope for the future, and I will absolutely be trying to stick with Linux when the Steam Deck shows up sometime next year.
Yeah.
But, to summarize the question that we set out to answer, is this the year of the Linux desktop? For gamers, the answer is no. I'm sorry. And the more niche your use case gets, maybe you're super into modding or the racing or flight sim scenes, or maybe you're a big VR lover, the more resounding that no gets.
Yeah, I mean, if you are a PC gamer and you like tweaking, getting your hands dirty and tweaking your system to optimize performance and blah, 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 you might actually enjoy this kind of stuff. If you have time and you're not concerned about being able to play the latest games right at launch, Linux gaming is actually pretty dang fun. I enjoy some of the tweaking that you have to do to get the system working. I learn a lot from doing that. To get your games to work, you learn a lot doing that. But for me, if I just want to play a game, then, I'm going to go play VR. I'm going to go play one of my retro consoles. It's not going to be, on my PC. I don't really consider myself much of a PC gamer, if I'm being completely honest.
And if I'm being honest, I'm in the same camp. But something has given me a lot of hope, and that's how much positivity we've seen from the Linux community in spite of our concerns. Because even if I'm not ready to convert my gaming rig just yet, it gives me hope that one day the meme will end and the year of the Linux desktop will come. I'm as anti-monopoly as anyone, and I'd hate to see the status quo maintained forever.
Well, the reason we've been positive is because they've been completely fair. They're not out in this to destroy Linux. They're out here, raising concerns that the community has taken and run with and tried to resolve. And that is the kind of stuff that we need. We need these outside perspectives so that we can make a more welcoming and inviting and usable Linux desktop experience. That's what we need. And when I see comments like this that are like, oh, they're just out here trying to destroy Linux, that's crazy talk. That is ridiculous. They're not like some Microsoft shill fanboys. They don't like Windows. They have nothing but complaints about Windows 10 and 11. So I don't understand where this paranoia comes from. There's been a lot of people who have said that, they don't like Linus Tech Tips or whatever. I really like Linus Tech Tips, and I respect Luke and Linus a lot even after watching this series. I think that what they've done here is great for Linux gaming. I honestly do. And I think that the future is bright for us. Like they're saying, what we have is potential. We have room for growth. You can't say that about Windows. You really can't. You can't say that Windows has potential for growth because it doesn't. Windows is going nowhere but down. And Linux will be, within the next 5 or 10 years, Linux will be the default desktop. The reason for that is because Microsoft is destroying Windows. They are destroying it. So from my perspective, we need stuff like this series from big people in the PC community to actually take a look at this, tell us what needs to be fixed, and then we can fix it. And so I'm really grateful for Luke and Linus doing this because we need it. Well, that's going to do it for this video. If you agree with what I'm saying, let me know down in the comments. If you disagree with me, let me know as well. If you're into these kind of reaction videos, hit that like button, because if you hit the like button, it'll let YouTube know that you like these kind of videos. It'll let me know that you want to see more like this. if there's other videos you want me to react to, use the comments as well. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on what I should take a look at. Stay tuned to the channel. We have some big stuff coming up in 2022. I'm very, very excited for what we've got going on. I bought a house, and so the things that we're going to be doing here are going to be incredible. I can't wait to have you guys see what we got cooking here over at Heavy Element. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for now, though. I want to thank all of my patrons and my YouTube members, without whom I would not be able to do what I'm doing here. If you want to support the show, if you believe in the work that I'm doing, you can hit the links down below to become a patron or a YouTube member. That's going to do it for now, though. Happy New Year. Have a blessed day, and I'll see you next time.